What's poppin', adventurers? It's Max again from Whitcree Media, and for this video, we're giving you guys an in-depth Sorceress guide for World of Dragonest. Now, like in our last video, we'll be talking about all the skills and what's viable for you to use. But before that, let's of course talk about the pros and cons. So Sorcs have a lot of viable chain skills that sits at a whopping 350 to 400% attack, making them one of the top tier damage classes in the game. They also possess one of the game's strongest utility skills, which we'll cover in a bit. A huge portion of their skills, both normal and chain, cover a wide AoE that makes farming, nesting, and raiding so convenient. A wide AoE means you can attack from a safer distance compared to warriors, slayers, or clerics. Two of their core skills, Frozen Spikes and Triple Orbs, contribute so much damage as you can leave them underneath the target while casting other spells. They also possess a lot of armor reduction debuffs that can increase the party's damage. And lastly, their kit allows them to be one of the most important classes in Team PvP and Guild Wars. With buffs, debuffs, and crowd control being the core of the Sorceress, they can allow their teammates to dish out more damage or do it themselves. But of course, in all its glory, there are some cons. So faster skill rotations mean more damage, right? Unfortunately, that's not the case with the Sorceress. An Alestra can cast a 6-chain skill combo, but they did balance it out with low board damage. Most of the time, you'll end up casting only 4 chain skills per spirit duration. Unless you equip Flame Worm, Phoenix Storm, and Frozen Sword or Glacial Spike, Sorcs might have a hard time in the early phases of the game doing reputation quests, which are essential to your character's growth. And lastly, while this doesn't sound so bad, you will feel the small impact once you hit raids and PvP. Sorcs have slow animations and are vulnerable while doing so. Having average super armor will definitely interrupt you from your casts. Now, we've got a lot to talk about, so with that being said, let's head over to the skills, starting with the book skills. Flame Worm is one of the few starter skills that deals above average damage and stays in your skill bar until you decide what advancement you should take. This offers the complete package for both support and attack roles, so make sure to have this at level 57 if you decide to become a Saliana, otherwise invest a good amount of points in it. Although the damage of Glacial Spikes can barely hold up, it makes up for it by having a decent range and a freeze or a stun. If you decide to advance into an Alestra, then expect to have a huge damage spike in melee range due to the diffusion added effect. Definitely pick this up with a few skill points in it, as this is also one of your main skills for doing daily or reputation quests. Firewall is a skill that's mostly in your skill bar, especially when raiding under the support role. Definitely a skill that you must invest in. Be sure to have this permanently if you're advancing for a Saliana. Frozen Spikes chimes in as one of your must-have skills that should always sit in your skill bar. This skill can be left on the ground as you use other skills, giving you consistent damage over time, especially in raids where you need to dodge certain mechanics. Advancing to an Alestra will give this skill even more value in terms of utility due to the increase in damage area. Let's get sad for a bit, as Phoenix Storm's board damage is probably the lowest in the game. What I can tell you though is that this skill makes reputation or daily quests a breeze. You can also cheese the hell out of the skill during raids under the support role for that consistent party attack buff. And lastly, Icy Shards is one of the best debuff skills the game has to offer with some decent board damage. Definitely have this in your skill bar, especially when you're going for the attack role. This skill is also amazing during reputation or daily quests. Moving on to the chain skills. So Inferno is the perfect finishing skill for your chain rotations. Make no mistake to cast this first though, as the attack animation eats up a lot of your spirit duration. Meanwhile, Freezing Field is a decent skill that's centered more on PvP than PvE. Do not underestimate the slow duration of this skill. Pair that up with Shatter, which is a great chain skill for starters. Besides, a decent board damage and a fast kill animation is the formula of a great skill after all. Moving on to Flame Road, which will always be your opening chain skill when under the attack role, as the armor debuff amplifies the damage of your rotations even further. The only downside to this skill is its skill animation and the inability to control the direction. I am keeping my fingers crossed that Eyedentity will allow us to navigate the skill direction in the upcoming patches. Chilling Mist is your third best chain skill using books, a good alternative for Inferno until you change your class. Now, if we're talking about numbers, then this skill is far inferior compared to your main chain skills. Rolling Lava is not worth your time, so sorry to say that. You can leave it after midcast, but again, it takes up a lot of time to set up. Alright, moving on to the orb skills, starting with Gravity Blast, which is a great starter skill and is staple when going for the Colosseum. Don't think too much about it unless you're into PvP or advancing for the Majesty. Well, the board damage of Energy Ball is great, and the animation will only leave you open and displaced, especially in raids where boss mechanics require you to have calculated movements instead of just moving forward. Well, it's only worth it if you're actually going for the Smasher. Linear Ray is another great starter skill that you might want to consider when going for the support role, as this gives your party a penetration buff. Okay, so this is where the Majesty shines best. Unlike Frozen Spikes that deal only 80% board damage, this beast of a skill dishes out a fine 260%. A nasty defense debuff in the attack roll, and allows you to cast other skills as this skill stays for a couple of seconds. Note that you can cancel out this skill after casting an orb, allowing you to control the number of orbs in the field if you're after fast rotations. The only downside to this skill is the skill animation and the duration, but it shouldn't stop you from loving this skill even if you're advancing to different classes besides the Majesty. Now, I've been wondering why a lot of Sorcs don't have Light Column equipped. This skill has the lowest cooldown among your orb skills and gives you a knockup. This skill is more suitable on the support role, but it's not a bad choice to have it in the attack role. And last but not the least is one of the best crowd control skills in the game. This skill pulls in an unlimited amount of enemies towards the center of the hole. Attack or support, you need to have this in your skill bar, and only an idiot would not take this for team PvP. Moving on to chain skills, starting with Spiral Force, a great starter skill that offers some AoE, a soft crowd control, and a ridiculous amount of board damage. It's also a great gap closer in the Colosseum. If only the attack animation didn't take forever, Ninetale Laser covers a wide range and a monstrous board damage, but suffers from that gentle fall after the animation. Great starter skill until you get Spectrum Shower, and you can also do 4 rotations with this skill. But you need to sacrifice Tumble to cancel the remainder of the animation. Diffusion will turn this into a tier S skill though, so mastering when to cancel this skill will definitely be rewarding. Moving on to something that's faster than Ninetale Laser, which is Summon Comet. You can either keep this or switch Gravity, but this skill shines best in PvE for the most part due to the defense debuff on the attack roll. Laser Cutter is a highly underrated skill that's rare to see among sorcerers. This is the perfect opening skill for your orb chain skill rotations. Definitely max this out if you're opting for Smasher. Spectrum Shower only takes 3 seconds to completely finish compared to Ninetale Laser's 4.5. While that may not sound much, note that a single second can make the difference between casting 3 to 4 chain skills. Switch Gravity, on the other hand, is a must-have for Team PvP or Guild War, as this skill can definitely change the tides of a fight due to its root crowd control. And lastly, let's head over to the ultimates, starting with a skill that you shouldn't invest in. So Fiery Vortex is definitely not worth it. It only looks cool. But at least we have Blizzard Storm, which is the only ultimate you should cast in PvP. Whether you go for attack or support, it doesn't matter, as this has the highest board damage and unleashes a punishing stun for 3 seconds per damage tick. Its only equal is Meteor Storm, which is its PvE counterpart. Speaking of which, Meteor Storm is the only ultimate to cast in PvE, given that you see the right opening. The armor reduction is what makes this skill useful in raids. Meanwhile, Eraser is disappointing. Low board damage, long skill animation, and nothing much but a measly heal on the support role. Don't bother with this skill. So before we move on to the role skills, here's a quick suggestion for your skill bar for every situation. Okay, moving on to role skills. So unlike my first guide where I talked about all the role skills, we'll be focusing on the essential ones from now on. I just don't want to waste too much of your time on such wasteful skills. Opening the list is Arcane Force, which gives you a flat attack boost that never fails. Gravity Revolution, which is best geared for PvP. Time Explosion for that selfish cooldown reduction plus Spirit Boost, and Burning Hand that deals true burn damage, which sadly doesn't really scale well, but is a welcome addition to your actives. Moving on to the attack passive, starting with Magical Power that permanently boosts your attack, Mana Control which complements your debuffs by making it last longer, Time Control which reduces the downtime of your skills, and Disappear which lessens your threat to avoid being targeted by the monsters. So when you opt for the support role, your playstyle changes. Your normal skills have to be different for your teammates to benefit more out of your kit. So onto the role skills. Starting with Arcane Area, which is undoubtedly one of the best role skills because of that flat attack boost. It doesn't suffer from a cap. Time Dodge to remove that pesky crowd control, Beyond Time, which makes the Sorceress a highly contested party mate in all situations due to that party cooldown reduction and spirit buff. And lastly, Elemental Wind, which complements your role as a support, and Ice Barrier, which is a good alternative if your party has a lot of heals already. Moving on to the support passive, which is opened by Time Restore, giving you a flat cooldown reduction, Hour Control, which complements your buffs by making it last longer, Magical Shadow, which lessens your threat every time you're attacked, and Mana Breeze for that added survivability. We are now down to the best part of this guide. Now you can opt to choose between book or orb skills. Well, both are good, but one deals the highest damage. Again, I'd like to point out that before you use your chain skills, always make sure to use all of your normal skills first. Every second counts, so let's start with the book skills. So always open your chain skills with Flame Road for that armor debuff, and then follow it up with Inferno. Do a Flame Worm, and then another Flame Road, and then a Glacial Spike plus Inferno for a total of 2,564% board damage. Note that you will have to cancel Flame Road near the end to get this right. If you fail, then it's fine. You're still dishing out a lot of damage. Now let's move on to the orb rotations. Of course, starting with Laser Cutter, follow it up with Spectrum Shower, and then drop a huge ass comet onto their heads, and then drop a Gravity Blast plus Laser Cutter, and then just cast one triple orb, okay? Just one. And then end it with a Spectrum Shower for a total of 2,365% board damage. So before you dismiss this rotation, it's important to also note the armor reduction from triple orbs. This is easier to execute since you don't need to use Blink at all. Now, to the million-dollar question, choosing which class. So I'm not going to give a super detailed guide for the class advancements in this video, as it deserves a separate video with a better and more in-depth explanation. However, I can give you guys some general insights for all classes. So starting with the Salyana, this class specializes in wide AoE skills and massive raw power, a perfect choice for a pure PvE player. But I'll be honest, it might be hard for this class to shine in PvP, but I do want to point out that their burn damage is actually true damage, which means it bypasses all PvP defenses like Iron Wall. Sadly, the damage scaling for their burn skills are so low that it's barely noticeable. So I have a bias with the Alestra, as this class is one of my favorites ever since DNPC. This is the only class that can complete a 6-skill rotation due to its fast skill animations. Their board damage might be the lowest among the four, but their agility and utility in both PvE and PvP is more than enough to keep you relevant in all stages of the game. Are basically the epitome of a hybrid class. It takes some time to master their unique playstyle, but once you do, you'll be dealing some serious damage in both PvP and PvE. You can already get the diffusion effect from 90 Laser, which basically triples the board damage. And lastly, all hail the queen of Team PvP and the greatest support in your guild war, the Majesty. Specializing in crowd control and massive AoEs, Majesties can turn the fight around with Black Hole and Gravity Switch. The only drawback from this class is the lack of love from the devs that only tweaked a couple of improvements in their skills. They are less efficient in raids compared to their peers. Let's wrap this video up with the pet, mount, awakening, and grinding guides. So starting with pet. Crown Corgi, of course, hands down. The second best option is the Husco, and if you're a cat person, stick with the Telnumara shop or the blue short hair. Now, this may sound strange, but the best mount for the Sorceress, in my opinion, has to be the Ghost Horse Phantom, as it comes with a full package of what you need to dish out damage. Attack does not suffer from a cap or diminishing returns, and penetration is not your innate stat, unlike the Slayer, so you'll get a healthy amount of it. On top of that, the Ghost Horse Phantom pieces are easier to get compared to, well, dragons. I'm just giving you a practical choice so that you can save more money. The raw power of the Sorceress comes from her chain skills. I've said this many times and I'll say it again. Spirit Obtain Rate is so underrated in a world full of crits and crit damage. You can opt for more crit rate if you wish, but I do suggest giving Spirit Obtain Rate a try. So here are 2 example builds for the Sorceress. For build 1, you're just going to have to prioritize getting that Spirit Obtain Rate, and then the rest will fall under the crit rate buffs. For build 2 is of course the 5-4-5 piece, which is a 5-piece purple Manticore and a 5-piece orange Decidus. And finally, moving on to grinding. Now this is where a lot of things change. As I said, crit rate is not our innate stat, unlike the archer, but luckily there's a cap to crit rate and penetration, and it's estimated around 12k. Crit damage cap, on the other hand, sits at, well, around like 15k, or at least when you notice that your attacks deal ×3 the normal damage. Thank you so much for making it to the end, and we hope this guide helped you out. If you want to know more about the Awakening feature, please feel free to click the next video on the screen. If you found this helpful, please do drop a like and subscribe to Whipped Media for more informative guides in the future. Peace, be nice, stay safe, and we'll see you next time.